When I was very young, I had a friend named Ellie. I don't know exactly how we first met, but it felt like she had always been there, waiting to play with me. She had a small smile. Ellie and I spent most of our time in the backyard playing hide and seek. She was always better at hiding than I was, disappearing behind the bushes or the old oak tree, waiting patiently for me to find her. When I finally did, she would giggle and dart away, challenging me to catch her again. Ellie was a year older than me, or so she said, though I never questioned it. To me, she was just my best friend. But there were some things about Ellie that seemed a little strange, even to my young mind. She always left just before my mom came outside. I'd beg her to stay, hoping my mom could meet her, but Ellie would shake her head, her face turning serious. "Not today," she'd whisper. I didn't understand why she didn't want to meet my mom. She'd say she liked my mom, but something always held her back. When I told my mom about Ellie, she'd give me this worried look, her face growing pale. One day, she knelt down, took my small hands in hers, and said, "Honey, there's no one here named Ellie. She isn't real. Please stop talking about her." Her words confused me. How could Ellie not be real? She was as real to me as the sunlight filtering through the trees or the dirt beneath my fingernails. But my mom's insistence planted a small seed of doubt in my mind, though I tried to ignore it. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and shadows crept across the backyard, Ellie and I played our final game of hide and seek. I remember it. She looked different that night, her usual cheer replaced with a somber expression. "I have to leave," she whispered as we sat under the oak tree. Her voice was barely audible, trembling like a fragile thread ready to snap. "Why?" I asked. "Why can't you stay?" She didn't answer at first. Her big, curious eyes seemed to search mine, as though trying to find the right words. Finally, she said, "I just can't. But you'll be okay. You're strong." I begged her not to go, tears welling up in my eyes, but Ellie only smiled that small, sad smile and stood up. She turned away and walked into the darkness, her figure fading like smoke in the wind. I called out for her, but she didn't come back. The backyard felt emptier than ever, and for a long time, I carried that emptiness with me. As the years went by, the memories of Ellie began to blur, becoming like a distant dream. I stopped talking about her, partly because my mom would always hush me whenever I brought her up. "Let's not dwell on things that aren't real," she'd say, her tone tight. Eventually, I convinced myself that Ellie had been nothing more than a figment of my imagination, a coping mechanism during a turbulent time in my childhood. But everything changed when I turned 16. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon, and my mom asked to talk to me in the living room. Her voice was shaky, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. She told me something that made my heart stop. Before I was born, she said, I had an older sister named Ellie. She had passed away due to complications with her lungs shortly after I was born. My mom's eyes glistened with tears as she spoke, her voice heavy with guilt and sorrow. At first, I refused to believe it. It couldn't be the same Ellie. My Ellie was vibrant, full of life, always laughing, but the more I thought about it, the more the pieces began to fit. Her reluctance to meet my mom, her sadness that final night, and even her name, it all pointed to something I couldn't explain. "It's probably just a coincidence," my mom said, her voice trembling as she tried to reassure herself as much as me. "You were a little girl going through a lot. Maybe you created an imaginary friend to help you cope." But I knew better. The memories of Ellie were too clear, too real to be the product of a child's imagination. I could still see her smile, hear her laugh, and feel the warmth of her presence. It wasn't something I could just dismiss. That night, unable to sleep, I went out to the backyard where Ellie and I used to play. The air was cool and still, the kind of quiet that presses against your skin. I stood under the oak tree, staring at the bushes where she used to hide. "Ellie?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. The wind rustled the leaves, and for a moment, I thought I saw a shadow move behind the bushes, but when I stepped closer, there was nothing there. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. It felt like she was watching, just out of sight, waiting in the darkness. Over the following weeks, small, inexplicable things began to happen. My room, which had always been warm, started to feel colder at night. I'd wake up to find my curtains slightly parted, even though I always closed them before bed. And once, while I was doing homework, I heard a faint giggle behind me. When I turned, the room was empty, but the scent of wildflowers lingered in the air, a scent that reminded me of Ellie. I didn't tell my mom about any of it. I didn't want to worry her or make her think I was losing my grip on reality. But deep down, I knew Ellie was still there, still watching over me in her own way. One evening, I decided to visit her grave. My mom hadn't taken me there before, maybe because it was too painful for her. The headstone was simple, her name etched delicately into the stone, Eliana Marie, beloved daughter. I knelt down, running my fingers over the cold granite, and whispered, "I remember you. I always will." As I stood to leave, a gentle breeze rustled the trees, and for a brief moment, I felt a warmth envelop me, like an embrace. Tears streamed down my face, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were of gratitude for the memories, for the connection, for Ellie. Even now, years later, I sometimes feel her presence. It's in the soft rustle of leaves, the fleeting shadows in the corner of my vision, and the occasional, gentle laugh carried on the wind. Ellie may be gone, but she'll always be with me, a part of my childhood I'll never forget. Love what you see? Then subscribe us and hit the bell icon to keep up to date and make sure you like the video. If you have a real horror story that you want to share, please email it to us. Our email is as follows: official@gmail.com.